School or United Sunday School, so it's pretty good attendance, I think. I just wanted to give a moment to introduce our speaker. Reverend Poppers was a mentor of mine in Chicago. In my last year at Moody Bible Institute, you're required to do an internship with the school. And I went out to lunch with Ben. I did not know him. I was at his sister church serving their ministry, and I wanted to know what it meant to come under care in the PCA. And since Ben led our churches from the Dutch Reformed denomination into the PCA, I thought, who better to ask than the guy that filed the entire draft to get us from one denomination to another. And it was at that meeting we had a barbecue called Bombers. We always are intoxicated by it after. Can't do much of anything. But what came out of that meeting was an offer to come alongside him and to serve his church for a year. It was in that church that I met my wife, Theresa. It was in that church that I got clarity from Ben himself to go down to Reformed Seminary and become a Southern transplant. And it is because of Ben in that way that I'm here before you today. So I've been indebted to Ben's ministry in my life and my family's life. And it was a few months ago when the session was discussing various missionaries we could support concerning affinity. Ben came up in the discussion. You'll be blessed by him as he served as the senior minister at First Reformed Church in Lansing, Illinois, and is now going to transplant to Southwest Utah. Much different even than the South. And so I hope you enjoy him as he shares some of the ministry that he'll be doing this summer and for the foreseeable future.
Thanks, Scott. Don't tell my other interns, Scott was my best and favorite intern. And so sending him down to Mississippi, so the local seminary, was a big sacrifice, but I'm glad that he's had such a good opportunity to serve, and now to serve you. He speaks very highly of this congregation. I'm very thankful for that and for you all. So I want a special thanks to the Mission Committee and to the session for having me and allowing me to not only be supportive, but to come and share with you a little bit about what we're doing. I'll give you just a brief introduction into what we will be doing, Lord willing, in Southwest Utah. And then I want to try to leave some time for questions to make sure that you are able to learn whatever it is that you would like to learn. So just a brief introduction. I'm going to try to break down what I'm talking about today into three questions. The three questions will be why and what and who. And I'll give you a little bit of a primer on the who, because what we're going to be doing is it's not just my wife and I and our children who are going to be moving to Southwest Utah, but we're going to have 5 families as a whole. We're moving from the Chicago area in May or early June and moving to Utah together. So there's not a core plan, a core team on the ground. I'm bringing my own. And so the Mormons went together on the Mormon Trail, and but we're Orthodox. We aren't Mormons. We're Orthodox Christians. But that's kind of the rough outline. And so I want to get into just our very simple mission. Try to keep things as simple as possible. Our objective, our mission, is to establish an Orthodox, Reformed, and Evangelical church in the spiritual desert of Southwest Utah. So the first question people often ask is, well, why Southwest Utah? Why not Nashville? Or why not Fort Myers? Or why not just stay home and plant down the street? And so I want to answer that question, I think, by presenting to you the very desperate need. Southwest Utah is rightly categorized as an unreached people group. The Joshua Project, which focuses on unreached people groups, defines an unreached people group as a place where there are 2% or less of the population is evangelical or Christian, and the area is not able to evangelize itself. The church is not able to evangelize the own region without outside assistance. And so Southwest Utah qualifies on both of those accounts. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of an idea. I call Southwest Utah a double desert because it is a desert. It's the northernmost part of the Mojave Desert. So in the summer, your average temperature high is 102 degrees. It was particularly hot this last summer. They had 29 out of 30 days at one point, whereas 110 degrees or hotter. And so it is a desert. You get about 9 inches of precipitation. Back in Chicagoland, we get about 9 inches of precipitation in March. And so we are moving to a very different climate, but it is also a beautiful place. All the pictures I have, with only one exception, are from Southwest Utah. So I have an opportunity not only to tell you what we're doing, but to recruit you with its beauty if you're looking for a place to move. I don't tell the session I'm doing this ahead of time, but this is a great place. It's a beautiful place. But the area, the climate, the geology is very much a metaphor for the people. It's a beautiful place. A lot of churches will say, we'd like to send groups, we'd like to send mission trips. I say, well, that's fine, but you're not going to have any houses to fix up because it's a rather wealthy area. The houses, generally speaking, look nice, and it's what you think of when you think of a Mormon area. It's rather clean cut, and so you might say that it is beautiful. At the same time, deserts are dead, and it's a spiritually dead place as well. So a little bit about that. I'll give you just a rough breakdown of the spiritual affiliations, religious affiliations of the area, as you would expect. Heavy Mormon population. People usually associate Salt Lake City with Mormonism, and that's good. It's kind of the beating heart of Mormonism. But just for the first time in history, since the Mormons moved there, less than half the people in Salt Lake City identify as Mormons. Whereas the farther south you go in Utah, the more generally conservative and numerous the Mormon population is. And so when you come down to St. George, which is as far south and west as you can get, and still be in Utah, you have a significant Mormon population. And the further south you get, and the more rural you get, the more conservative or traditional or fundamentalist the area is. So the fundamentalist Mormons, they're predominantly found in southern Utah. And so that's where we're going. We're going not to Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City is about a 5-hour drive away. And but we are in Utah, so you see that. But the real growing population is not the Mormon population. The Mormon population, as a percentage of the area, is actually declining. But the growing percentage of the population is not evangelicalism or Christianity. It's the nothing. And part of that is because, and I'll get into this in just a moment, part of that is because a lot of Californians are moving into the area. And they're coming in, they're not Mormon, but generally speaking, they're not Christian either. And so that number is going up. The second reason for that is that the Mormon church has a major retention problem. And only about half of people who grow up in the LDS church stay in the LDS church. And unfortunately, most of those people don't leave the idolatrous God of Mormonism for the true God. Most of them just leave religion for no religion at all. And so that 22% that's not religious, that continues to grow. If you do the math here, you'll come up with about 2% of the population identifies as evangelical Christians. Almost all of those are going to be Baptist or non-denominational, which means they just took Baptist out of the name a while ago. And if you want to have, this is a fun fact, perhaps not so fun. If you want to have a baby baptized and you live in St. George, Southwest Utah, and you're not a liberal and you're not a Catholic, you have to be Missouri or Wisconsin Synod Lutheran. Those are the only options available for you if you would like to do just what we did here this morning. And so, as a point of reference, there are more Protestants per person in Sudan and Bahrain and Qatar and Cuba and Sudan than there are in Southwest Utah. And this is right here in our own country, so this is, in fact, America's unreached people group. And I already mentioned this, but just My call is actually as an evangelist by the Northern California Presbytery. Northern California Presbytery, because there aren't enough churches in Utah to have its own presbytery. My call is as an evangelist. The PCA has very strict regulations on who can serve as an evangelist. The area has to be spiritually destitute and an unreasonable distance away from other PCA churches to be reasonably overseen. And so we are 120 miles away from the nearest PCA church, which is in Las Vegas, which is a different presbytery. The nearest PCA church in Utah is 280 miles away. And so it's about a 5-hour drive. Coming from Chicago Metro, where the farthest PCA church away from us in the presbytery was an hour and a half, and they would gripe and complain like they were having to drive to Cuba to go to the presbytery when they came down south to the south suburbs. 4.5-hour drive is rather significant for us. So this gives you an idea of kind of the isolation that we have. And so this question, and I can get more into this later if you would like, but this question kind of rattled in my head, and I thought it was an appropriate thing that Randy mentioned it here in the service this morning. The question came to me, if not you, then who? Somebody has to go, and if not you, then who? And that question kind of rattled in my mind, and eventually I succumbed, I might say, or I gave in to, I think it is me. Part of that came about because my wife has had, I would say, a very long-running, healthy fascination with Mormons. Not the kind of inquiry where you go, oh, that sounds good, but just a curiosity. And so a while ago, my wife learned from someplace on Instagram or some other thing like that, just in a passing comment from a Mormon, I think it was a food blogger, mentioned, you can invite the Mormon missionaries over to your house if you'd like to have a visit. So my wife thought, well, being who she is, well, this is great. They'll send the mission field to my front door. And so that's what we began doing. We began having the Mormon missionaries over in the house. And we began engaging with them that way. And then after that, had an opportunity to travel to southwest Utah and began to really understand that there is this desperate need that presented itself. And so, as I mentioned in just a moment, that is, I think, enough of a desperate picture to justify a PCA church plant. But the area is not just loaded with unbelievers already, about 200,000 people, but it is also a rapidly growing area. In 2018, it was the fastest growing area in the United States. In 2019, it was both it and Washington, which is kind of the main suburb of St. George, they were both in the top 10 fastest growing areas in the country. And it has been said to be the best place in the United States to start a small business. And so the area has doubled in size in about the last 20 years, and there's no end in sight to the amount of people moving into the area, and it continues to be a rapidly growing area. And as I just mentioned, the Christian population is not growing as a percent of the overall population. And so as the area grows rapidly, the need for churches grows rapidly, but number of churches to meet those needs does not grow. And so there are about 15 evangelical churches total for an area of about 200,000 people, which is growing by thousands of people in population every year. The price of a 2x4 has about tripled in the last couple years. That hasn't had any effect on the building of new homes in the area. Everywhere you go in the area, there are new subdivisions going up all over the place. And in fact, my wife and I were in St. George just last week. We interacted with lots and lots of people. None of them were Mormons. They were actually all unbelieving Californians. And so I think that really adds another dynamic to it, is that this is a growing mission field, growing needs. And so our hope is to meet those needs as best we can. So that gives you a why. I would expect you find it to be compelling. I find it to be very compelling. Of course, you would expect that since I'm the one who's going. But and I want to go into a little bit of kind of what we hope to do about it. And that is, our intention is to plant All Saints Reformed Church, PCA Church, And we want to define ourselves with three basic descriptors: that we are first Orthodox, we are second Reformed, and we are third Evangelical. And I want to get into those three just briefly to give clarity on who we are. So the first thing we are is that we are Orthodox. That doesn't mean that we are Eastern Orthodox or that we have some sort of background in Eastern Orthodoxy, Russian Orthodoxy, whatever it may be. It simply means that we're not heretics. And here in the Southeast, we take for granted that everybody is Orthodox. Churches are Orthodox, but that's not the case. In fact, the Mormon Church is heretical church. They have a very different conception of God entirely than we do. Their God used to be a man, just like you and I. That's a direct quote from Joseph Smith. And they deny the Trinity entirely. They believe it to be blasphemous and just preposterous. And in fact, this was something that my wife and I, in one of our talks with the local Mormon missionaries, we had a conversation, and it dawned on this one. They always come in pairs. It dawned on the one, and she said, "You guys believe in the Trinity?" I said, "Yeah, well, we're Christians." And she goes, "Well, huh?" I said, "Have you ever met a Trinitarian before?" "Oh, not that I know of." I thought, well, everybody you've ever met is a heretic. And so we are Orthodox. So we are not heretics. We live in a land of heretics, but we're not heretics. So that's the first thing, is that we are Orthodox. The second thing is that we are Reformed. And that is, I would say, that we major in grace. This is not Southwest Utah. This is the Reformation Wall in Geneva. But I think Reformed theology has the opportunity to be a particular balm to the abused spiritual state of the Mormon people. And that is because the Mormon people will talk about grace. The Book of Mormon, the book of 2nd Nephi, says that for we know that it is by grace that we are saved. Sounds good, right? Paul could have written that. Paul did write that. But it goes on right in the very next breath and says, after all we can do. What is that? Is even grace, right? How do you know if you've ever done all you can do? Anybody here feel like you've done all you can do? No, right, not at all. And so these people are spiritually abused, and they are motivated often by shame and by guilt. And so that drives a lot of people out of the Mormon church, but out of religion entirely. And so it's our conviction that preaching the doctrines of grace, preaching the Reformed faith of grace, will give people an alternative to the damning religion of Mormonism that is not like that at all, that will set them free. And so we are Reformed. And then thirdly, we are evangelical. And this is perhaps not the best slide, I suppose. That's the angel Moroni, which is from the Book of Mormon with a trumpet. But you get the idea. It's our objective not just simply to have a dead doctrine. We want to be Orthodox. We want to be Reformed. And we also want to be evangelical. We want to be sharing the gospel, addressing the needs of those 98% of people who do not profess Christ at all or profess a fake Christ. And so those are our three descriptors as to who we are. And then I think this is the exciting part now, is the who, and I want to get in. This is my favorite picture. You have to come visit us after seeing pictures like this. I want to get into the who. This is the most exciting, impressive part about what we're doing. As I said, it's an unreached people. There are no churches to have mother churches. There's no core team on the grounds. We're bringing our own. So I would like to introduce you to a few of them. Of course, this is me. This is my family. And I'm happy to talk to you about my family. My wife and I have been married for about 13 years. We have 6 children. I almost said 5. We have 6 children now. And my wife is a pianist and an organist. A lot of church plants have a hard time finding music people. I don't have that. I just bring mine with me wherever I go. And so we're excited about that. In fact, just this last week, we secured a place to meet for worship, which we're very excited about. It's a Missouri Synod Lutheran church, and they have an organ. It's about the only church in the area, perhaps the only church in the area that has an organ. So when you have an organist, and the Lord has been good in providing us with a place to worship while we're out there. So this is my family, and the next couple is Tanner and Ali Gadziak. They are from our church as well. Allie's a nurse and just found a job that she can do entirely from home, which is wonderful. And Tanner is a carpenter, which is good considering the area is growing so quickly, and Tanner is a deacon. This is Mike. He lost his first wife to brain cancer a year ago or so, and my wife and I found a way to get him on Sovereign Grace singles after a little while, and he met a nice Reformed girl from Idaho, and so they're getting married next month, and so we are thrilled about that. And so he's an electrician. He's a ruling elder as well. Then Hector and Jill are coming along as well. Hector works in logistics. Jill does graphic design. Hector is from Colombia, the country, which is good, really good for us. There's about 10% of the area is Hispanic. And so Hector, his first language is Spanish. And so being able to have a connection into that area, and that's a growing community as well, is going to be very helpful for us. And then finally, Scott and Theresa Deboer, they have 2 children as well. And so I say we have 10 children in our team. That sounds really impressive. 6 of them are mine. So I make that a little bit inflated number. But Scott is himself a veteran of Iraq and I believe served 2 tours over there. Now he works for the VA. He works with disabled veterans. And he handles especially their requests for financial support for injuries or wounds that they received in the course of battle. So he also is able to work from home, which we're thrilled about. That's really helpful. I'm only raising money for the church and for myself. These other men are planning to find jobs or already have found jobs. We're really grateful the Lord has given them portable employment. And so with an area that's growing so rapidly, there's a need for electricians, there's a need for carpenters, there's a need for logistics, and there's, of course, a need for VA stations all over the place, and you can work from home, so it doesn't matter. So the Lord has been kind in preparing us for this ahead of time. And beyond that, the Lord has been good in helping us build relationship together over the last maybe 7 years or so, that before this was ever in mind, we already had begun becoming friends, and more than just friends, but we had been in a Bible study together. Our lives had kind of been knit together, so that when this came up, we're able to trust each other and love each other enough that we're willing to move 1,700 miles across the country together, and bringing our families along as well. So that gives a little bit of a who. I'm happy to answer more questions about that in a moment as well. One of the things people often ask about is about our logo. Our logo is the Huguenot cross. I'm biased because I have Huguenot ancestry. The Huguenots were French Protestants. Fun fact, John Calvin was a Huguenot. And so French Protestants, they were severely persecuted by the French government and the Roman Catholic Church. And because they had to go out and meet in desolate areas, oftentimes in the middle of the night, they began to be called the church in the desert. So I thought, well, how appropriate. We're a church in a desert, and I'm a Huguenot. This is a good lineup. But the Huguenot cross is rich with symbolism. So you see that there's kind of 4 petals to the cross, and those represent the 4 Gospels. Then there's 8 dots at the end of the 4 petals. Those represent the Beatitudes. And then there's 12 points to the 4 fleur-de-lis that are between the petals, and those represent the disciples. And then there's hearts inside between the petals and the 4 fleur-de-lis. And then underneath that, you have a dove, which represents the Spirit-filled church living under the cross. And so we are very happy to have this as our logo. And All Saints is the name of our church, and we picked that for a number of reasons. Primarily because it's a little bit of a troll, if you're familiar with the word troll, on the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I know we are the real saints, so come and join us. But also, All Saints is the name of the church that Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to. And we perceive ourselves to be sort of protesting the devil's claim on southwest Utah. But also, fun fact, John Calvin was forced to flee Paris and flee France because of something that occurred on All Saints' Day. And so it all kind of comes together for us. And so this is a little bit of the background. I usually get questions about the name. Plus, it's a rich name, and things like new life and all those other things. Everything is new in churches these days. I like to be grounded in and rooted in things that are not so new, but in a very old faith, which is a beautiful faith. So this gets into a little bit of our relationship then. We say this is God's work. Of course, this is God's work. It's our lives, but we consider it to be your mission. We consider it to be our mission together. And it takes the call of God for missions, and it takes those who will go in response to that call, but then it takes those who will send as well. And so this follows the pattern of Paul and Barnabas in the church in Antioch. Paul and Barnabas were sent out and supported by the church as they went out to do mission work. And so just as important as the goers are to the mission, so the senders are essential as well. So we're very thankful for our senders. One of the primary passages for missions is this verse from Romans 10, or these verses from Romans 10. How are they to believe in him of whom they have never heard? And how are they to hear without someone preaching? And how are they to preach unless they are sent? Another one of those conversations we had with the Mormon missionaries that would come over. I had opportunity. We were inviting them to church. They invited us to church. They have church only on Sunday mornings. I said, well, I'm a pastor. I have somewhere to be on Sunday mornings. But we invited them to church. We had an evening service. They didn't have an evening service. And so we invited them to come. And I said, have you ever been to an evangelical church before? I said, no. I said, ever met an evangelical before? And they said, no. And so how will they hear without someone to preach, and how will they preach unless they're sent? This is an important verse for us. And then one of my favorite modern hymns is Facing a Task Unfinished. And one of the lines says, unnumbered souls are dying and pass into the night. And I would consider the work not only to be unfinished in southwest Utah, but really barely started. And so we're excited to be able to kind of break new ground in many ways. And we're thankful for you to be part of that. We are thankful. So we have two things that we would request of you. One, you're already doing as a church, which is giving. As someone who's raising support, I'm not a beggar. I'm in the business of treasure transfer. And so the Lord calls us to not store up treasures on earth, but rather to store them in heaven. And so in the work of the kingdom and in the work of bringing the gospel, then I consider myself to be in the work of treasure transfer. But every investor should ask the person who is selling them on something, so to speak. You should always ask someone who's asking you for something, what skin do you have in the game? So if somebody's starting a new business and they want you to invest, you should ask them, well, how much have you invested in this? And so I like to put that question on your lips. And you say, well, how much have you invested? I say, well, I've invested my life in this, so I invite you to invest as well. And so as a church, we're very grateful, but we would also welcome any of you to come on personally and support us. And I'd be happy to talk to anybody afterwards that is interested in doing that or has further questions. And then the second thing is we'd ask you to pray. And Scripture says, if the Lord doesn't build the house, the laborers labor in vain. You can write us $1 million check, and you're welcome to do so. But if the Lord doesn't work, it doesn't matter. And so we're thankful for churches that include us in their prayers, and we're thankful for individuals who include us in their prayers as well. That really is it for me. We have a website you can go to. We have a monthly newsletter as well. I put a little sign-up sheet back there. All you got to do is write your email address down, and I'll add you to the list. Please write legibly. I had a sheet this long from First Pres, and then a longer one from Westminster and Huntsville, and there were a number of names, people who are going to be very surprised when their friends are talking about our newsletter, and they're not. And if you sign like a doctor, I will not add you to the list. And so if you would like to, though, we'd be very happy to have you sign up for that. So I left a little bit of time for questions. And so if you have questions, now is the time. Yeah. Yeah, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. So my daughter, she's a very soft heart, and she's very burdened for people. So when we were driving down the street, wherever we were going, this was last fall, she would always tell me at the end of every trip that we took how many Mormon churches she had seen on the way. And it was always in double digits. Even if we just drove a mile down the road, it was always in double digits. So they're everywhere. No, we're gonna homeschool. We do classical conversations, and they actually have a group out there, which is very surprising. But your government schools are going to be taught by either Mormons or atheists, and so being already so isolated, we decided that this is best for our family. Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, is there a particular group that we're planning to evangelize? We're planning to evangelize anybody that the Lord kind of puts before us. No, we don't have a specific focus. So we have a realtor, we're looking for a house. I would say she's not atheist, but she's not religious. But we're just talking to her. I said, when we get out, we're going to invite you to church. Oh, okay. So it doesn't matter who it is. Yeah. We're moving in May as a group, and we plan to start services as soon as enough people in our core group are there. One of the things we have discovered recently is that there are some Reformed people in the area. Whether they will become part of our work or not, I don't know. But there is a ruling elder and his wife from Mississippi, Jackson area, who have just moved out there to start a small business. And so we've been in contact with them. But as soon as we get out there, we intend to start right away with our worship. It'd be very different. We had a church with average attendance of 300 or so in Chicago, where I'm from. It would be very different to go to 10 or so, but that's our intention. Yeah. Ephesians. I'm going to preach on Ephesians first. Ephesians, I think, gets to the heart of orthodoxy and the Reformed faith, but also is a letter specifically written to a church. What does it mean to be a church? So I think it's a good foundation to begin a church on. Yeah. That's a good question. We've found a diversity of within Mormonism, even within the missionaries who come. The missionaries are usually going to be your most zealous Mormons. They're not going to be your kind of Creaster Mormons where they're involved, kind of. But even among those, there are some who really know what they're talking about. And they actually know what it means to be a Mormon, and so you can engage them more intellectually. a good number of them have really no idea what Mormons believe. And so at one point we were talking, and they always come in pairs, and so I was addressing, that there are possibly an infinite number of gods in the way that you perceive, because your God used to be a man, and how many other gods are there? And it's even been said, Mormon theologian, kind of the chief one, said, well, could be an infinite number of gods. And so I brought this up, and one of the girls says, no. And the other one next to her goes, yeah. And I thought, well, this one knows what she's talking about, and this one doesn't. The ones who don't, you really approach just with the gospel, like straight. The ones who do, you engage with them more because they're more well-versed. I actually ran into one, and afterwards I said to my wife, is she accidentally converted because she believed in grace? She believed that Jesus was God. I thought, your church doesn't believe any of this. I don't know where you came from. So it just depends on who they are. Yeah. No, not 2x2 with name tags. One of the real benefits of having a team is that the other 4 men will have jobs and will have different neighbors, and so it will help us to get a footprint much more quickly. But no, we'll try to avoid the name tags in 2x2. 2x2 is a good way. I mean, Jesus did it. Anybody else? Yeah. Yeah, pretty much they expect everybody's Mormon, and so a lot of people will just ask, are you Mormon? And I'll say no. But we are white, and we have 6 children, and I don't have tattoos, and we don't have different color hair, which means people are going to expect that we are Mormons, and so we're kind of going undercover. We have a life of camouflage. They'll never see it coming. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And when they find out that we're not Mormons, they'll send the missionaries to your door even when you live in Mormon territory. So that's good. We'll have opportunity. Anybody else? Got 2 or 3 minutes left. Yeah. I graduated from Reformed Seminary twice. So I have my MDiv from Chicago, and from RTS Jackson, and I have my DMin from Orlando. My DMin sounds so much like demon. My thesis or dissertation or whatever was heteronormativity in the New Testament creation texts. And so I focused on human sexuality. Basically, it's very simple. Men and women are different, and so you should have one of each in a marriage. It took me about 300 pages to make the point, but I come out of a liberal background. The denomination I come from, Scott mentioned that, is I come from a liberal denomination, and so when kind of the final straw for us was there was a professor at kind of the big seminary for the denomination came out with a book, Bible, Gender, Sexuality, and he made what he would call an evangelical argument for same-sex relationships. And so that was kind of the final straw that pushed me and a number of other churches out. And so I hold a little bit of a, because my great-great-grandparents were part of the RCA, and so I still consider myself a bit of a refugee hiding in the PCA. So that I wrote it with special reference to his book. But his book is the book making these points. So any of these kind of cool younger guys like Matthew Vines, I don't know if you're familiar with Matthew Vines, God and the Gay Christian. Matthew Vines plagiarizes James Brownson, and Brownson let him do it. I mean, it's not illegal, but almost word for word, page for page in a lot of places. Nothing to do with Mormons. Anybody else? We're looking for a 4-bedroom house, and it's going to cost us at least $600,000. Yeah. And that's not like a nice one. That's like, it's good. It's good. Because it's growing so quickly. And materials are so expensive in general, but everything has to be shipped in because it's a desert. So if you want to give a donation to the Coppers Family Housing Fund, it's not tax-free, but you're welcome to do it. Anybody else? Well, I'll pray for us and for you. Heavenly Father, you are so good, and you are so kind to us. You have brought us, by your grace, into the faith, into the true church. And I thank you for this church and for the pastors here who proclaim the gospel, the truth, and teach it. And we thank you for long heritage of faith in churches like this here and around the country. And then we thank you as well for new churches, even like All Saints, that go and bring the gospel, the same gospel, different places. I pray that you would bless the ministry of this church. You would do so richly. Bless the church with unity, purity, and peace, and fruitfulness in all the appropriate ways. And I thank you that you've given us a relationship of partnership, and pray that you would cause our efforts, both those who go and the means that are sent with them, that you would cause them to bear fruit, far exceeding what could be reasonably expected. And so we pray for your blessing on the rest of this Lord's Day as well. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you very much. I'll be around for a while, but otherwise, it was nice to meet you and at least see you. I won't remember any of your names probably, but it was nice to see you.